Okay, I was going to suggest, because we are recording this, do we want to kick off now and kind of jump in? And for those who maybe join the call a little bit later, they can kind of the recording. I won't do too much talking. I've got a disgusting cold at the moment, but I just wanted to say thank you everybody for joining. This is the first time we've done something like this, so huge thanks to the Good Data Institute, because they were the ones who reached out to us and said, hey, we've got this idea, we'd love to do this. And thank you to all the kind of Xero whānau who's kind of joined us online. And yeah, I'm new to this, so I'm kind of intrigued just as much as everybody else to see how this goes. So I'm going to hand it over to the Good Data Institute team. Go for it, guys.
Thanks, Ruth. Hi, everyone. I'm going to just quickly share my screen. Just before we get started as well, I've set up a Slido, which is something where each of you guys can ask and vote on questions, and you can do it anonymously or as yourself. So I'm going to share that link in the chat, which you can open on the Google Hangouts. So yeah, just if you have any questions, please ask, and we'll be monitoring the Slido, and we'll answer the questions as they come. Cool. So I'll share my screen. Can everyone see my screen sharing?
Yeah, it's coming up now. Cool.
What is it, on presenter view, or is it, which one can you see?
Yeah,
we see both slides, so your presenter view.
Oh, okay. How do I change the one that I'm actually presenting? This is classical technical difficulties. Screen 2, there we go. Cool. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Awesome. So yeah, welcome to today's workshop. I'm Vivek, the Executive Director of GDI. I'm doing a PhD at the University of Melbourne. And I used to work as a data scientist at a tech company in Auckland, up on K Road, building data products in a machine learning platform. And then after that, I joined the GDI kind of a month or so after it started. And Tom is actually the founder, and he's also a director at the GDI. So Tom, do you want to do a quick intro to yourself?
Yeah, so I was around from the very beginning of GDI, and my background is in management consulting with LEK Consulting based in Sydney. This year I'll be departing for the UK to study an MBA over at Oxford in the UK, if all things go to plan. And my experiences in the not-for-profit world have been across a range of charities. I've supported the Hunger Project Australia through a Great Wall of China trek, and have been an ambassador for a few years now at Opportunity International, which some of you might know, which is a microfinance organisation. Pass back to you, Vivek.
Awesome. So the GDI Institute, or the Good Data Institute, really started, and what we're trying to solve is that charities often lack the resources, time, the know-how, or strategy on how to deal with data. In terms of resources, there's tools like we'll be looking at Tableau in this session that they either just can't afford because they're really expensive, lack of constraints, or the time or resources as well. They don't have the right people, or often the right skill set. People in not-for-profits come from a various set of backgrounds, and often not quantitatively disciplined backgrounds. And the last thing is the strategy side. They often don't come in from the right backgrounds to really know what the right strategy for data and analytics is. So what GDI's mission is to do is really bring people with experience in delivering these to businesses, to charities. And what we do is pro bono work for a variety of different charities. So what we've done is built a volunteer network of about 70 data science or consulting or analytics professionals with thought leadership from kind of our senior leadership team. And we work with a range of charities around the world, really, on delivering a variety of different projects for them. The people that we kind of have in our team are analysts or data scientists, not really the super technical data engineers or software engineers. We don't work on kind of productionizing machine learning or things like that for our clients. So we use a variety of different tools, Tableau, Python, to develop data products or do visualizations for impact measurement, or even looking at operational improvements and breaking down kind of where processes are being weakened or how impact is being measured for organizations. So some of the charities that we've worked with kind of range across the world. We've gone to 5 countries so far, if I recollect correctly, Tom. And we've worked with 21 different charities, and here are a different set of charities that you can see that we've worked with. I'm going to pass it back over to Tom. So Tom's going to actually be running most of the workshop, and he'll walk you through kind of an agenda and then get going through the actual content. So that was just a bit quick summary of what GDI does, but that's enough from me, and I'll hand it over back to you, Tom.
Yep, no problem. We'll just present again.
Hopefully with less technical difficulties this time.
Yep. Everyone should have that up on their screen now. Just give a heads up if you can see this. Great, thanks Simon. So yeah, really excited to run through the rest of the workshop with you all. We're going to really start from the base in terms of what is data analytics, how you can best deploy it across your not-for-profit. And we're going to do this across the 2 sessions, which you're aware of. Hopefully you can join both today and tomorrow. We're going to, for the rest of today, cover off on the basics as to how data analytics can be deployed in a not-for-profit setting, how it's best utilized, and what tools can be deployed. We're going to give it a brief introduction to Tableau, which is a really useful tool that enables you to move up a gear from traditional and simple Excel analysis. That's really democratizing data analytics. And tomorrow we'll go through some houses using Tableau, and everyone can work through that simultaneously with us using Tableau Public. So again, thanks for joining, for everyone on the call, and for the Xero team as well who have dialed in. Jump in at any point and provide extra color and flavor as we progress. So we'll get started really at the very fundamentals. We here at the Good Data Institute, we've reached out to probably 26 not-for-profits now and collectively got an understanding of the state of data analytics in the not-for-profit space. And it's probably in the very early stages of this sort of uptake curve, or S-curve, as any type of technology follows. And at the very base of utilizing data analytics is collection. So of course, collection's really, really important for a variety of means, but without it, none of the analysis that we'll discuss can even take place in the first place. So it's really central to grant applications, evaluation, reporting. It can really empower you to reach out to your donors and your target audience in a more targeted manner. And of course, it dictates the decision-making that you can drive as a not-for-profit to make sure you're making a dollar go further in the organization. And also, it's just really powerful for people in your organization and volunteers to understand what's happening in terms of the problems that your not-for-profit is tackling, but also how the not-for-profit is performing in tackling those problems. And so data is really, really useful from that perspective as well. So today in this workshop, we want to cover off on what we feel are the 3 core pillars, I would say, as to how we've seen data analytics used in a not-for-profit. So first off, the first thing that we are assisting not-for-profits with often is allowing that not-for-profit to understand the issues and the needs that it is tackling as an organization. So of course, this is going to be extremely varied across every not-for-profit, but getting a deep understanding of the problem that your not-for-profit is tackling is really, really important to be able to communicate to donors and so on. So this this will assist then for a variety of purposes. So, for example, we've assisted one charity we'll talk about in a moment with understanding the state of their audience that they're assisting, which are coffee farmers in Uganda. So they really wanted to build a clearer picture of the socio-economic profile of those individuals in Uganda and gather the right data, analyze it in the right way so that they could clearly communicate what they were trying to solve as an organization, because profits of their operation were distributed back to that community. The second pillar is, if you think about the not-for-profit itself, how it can run most efficiently and effectively. So the operations of that not-for-profit, data analytics is absolutely critical and is sort of the lifeblood that runs through that not-for-profit. So there'll be data that we will touch upon that you may or may not be collecting from a financial angle, from a marketing and comms angle, and also from your volunteer network and your employees. And that data can be used in a variety of ways to improve your not-for-profit. And then the third pillar, which is arguably the most important, would be impact. And this is something that is evolving field, the quantification of social impact. But we want to touch on today the sorts of indicators you might want to be tracking and how you can think about how you can be best measuring impact for your not-for-profit. So let's jump straight away into the first bucket around issues and needs. So really at the ground floor of a not-for-profit is your mission statement and your needs statement. And what we've seen from working with a range of not-for-profits is that the data that you need to think about collecting in terms of the problem that your NFP is tackling needs to be really intrinsically linked to that needs statement in the first place. So in thinking about that, it's useful to ask a few questions. What is the need that your not-for-profit's tackling? Who is in need? Where are they? And what are the consequences of meeting that need? So there's a range of examples there on the right-hand side of whether it's, I mentioned before, the average annual income of a coffee farmer in Uganda, the proportion of people living in absolute poverty, whatever that metric is, identifying that is a really, really good first step. And where it's not possible to quantify an exact metric, it's really useful often not-for-profits to be able to at least build some individual stories that provide more color and context around the challenge that the not-for-profit's tackling, whether it's Indigenous equality, gender equality, poverty, or environmental cause. So I'm going to shift across now to where you might get that data from, where you might start looking. Now, every not-for-profit will be at a different stage of that journey of understanding what data they need to be collecting and where they can get that from. But for those charities that are in more of their early stages of development and growth, it's really useful to start broad and thinking about the sources of data from public databases. So that's government, census, World Bank, World Health Organization, any reports and studies that you can find relevant to what your not-for-profit is tackling and the challenge it's taking on. And then, of course, you've probably got self-conducted surveys and interviews and other forms of data that you internally are starting to track. And that might interplay with that third pillar I mentioned around impact. Because you need that baseline, which we'll get to in a moment, that you can track how things are changing as you, as a not-for-profit, are driving change in that community. And then there's a range of collection tools. So at the very core, it's useful probably just to start with thinking about how you can best utilize Excel or the Google suite of tools as well, which is all free for use, such as Google Sheets and Google Forms and also SurveyMonkey. So those will be useful tools for you as well, just at the very basic level to start with. We'll talk a little bit more about what other tools you could go moving forward as you grow as an organization. I'll give one example, and I might just pause there for any reflections and any extra commentary that anyone wants to add in. I mentioned this example here where we were assisting KUA, who are a great charity, a social enterprise that sources coffee ethically from the Bugisu region of Uganda. They then provide that coffee to workplaces across Australia. It's a completely circular economy, so they will collect the residual waste or the ground beans, and they are ultimately providing the profits of that enterprise back to Uganda. Now, they worked with us to understand the state of the Ugandan coffee industry and what was the problem that they were trying to confront, which is that Uganda is an undeveloped nation, and that livelihoods there could be drastically improved if you could have some sort of enterprise generating profits back into that community. So we looked at investigating their partner firstly. So their partner company provided us a data set which was provided details around the farmers, which regions they came from, how much coffee they produced. I think one thing we were able to do here, which every not-for-profit should look for opportunities to do, is to visualize that. So if you can map it and understand the relative scale of the individuals and the recipients of who you're generating some form of social welfare back to or assisting in some way, that is a useful first step. So we painted this clear picture as to where these farmers were located, how much coffee they were producing, which regions were producing more. We looked at then the socioeconomic profile, so the gender balance. We were able to ascertain for them that women were a really important part of their coffee economy back in Uganda. And all of this data we analysed through Tableau, which we'll get to later today, and then also tomorrow when we run a few exercises. And really, ultimately, this exercise helped us paint a clear picture of the state of individuals in Uganda, which is obviously the target for this particular not-for-profit, and that information allowed them to more accurately communicate with their donors and other people in their community that were supporting the charity, because prior to this, it wasn't super clear as to the state of that particular industry, which was very much underserved in Uganda. So I'll pause just here for the moment before we go to the next pillar, and just for any extra comments or if anyone wants to ask a question at this point.
We've had one question, Tom, on the slider. Do you generally recommend just a single need to try and tackle, or is it okay to be covering a few related needs? So I'm guessing the question meant needs in terms of a problem to solve using data. So it really depends kind of like what the context of the question is in terms of what you're trying to solve. Ideally, someone has like a coherent data strategy that you can tackle simple questions because you have the right data present for you. So I'm not sure kind of the context of what the question was. So if the person wants to like...
Yeah, that's easy. That was me. So okay. I guess like in that example with the Uganda piece, like what you're trying to fix there is actually empowering and enriching that particular area, right? So that's a nice broad top level need. What we do with the Robotics Trust is that there's going to be an unprecedented amount of a lack of technical knowledge in the generations going forward if we don't address it now. But then at the same time, there's a secondary need that we address, which is that we want to make sure those, you know, the typical stereotype of nerds who go into tech, that they do have social skills and they have all these well-rounded skills that we build resilience into them and all these other pieces. So it's kind of like they are related needs, but I can't address it with a single statement per se without having an and in there. And then at that point, I just feel like I'm cheating.
That's a really good question, Janet. And yeah, completely understand that sort of dilemma. And I think in these situations, it's more than appropriate to have a few indicators that would together holistically give a bit of better picture as to the, you know, the state of the problem that you're trying to address. And so whilst you might have one overarching needs statement or vision for your organization, underneath that, there might be, say, 3 to 5 key indicators that could be a good proxy to gauge the progress of your organization towards that, that particular goal or aim that you've got in mind. So yeah, really good question. And some organizations then might even look to put those indicators together and form an index, which would collect, in one single metric, give the organization, from an internal perspective, view of progress. So if you could weight each of your indicators, your 3 or 4 or 5 topics, these ones are more important than those, and then sum them up, at least internally, then you've still got one index that tracks your progress. But it is important to break it down. So that's a good question. Any other thoughts, comments, or I might jump into the second pillar. Great. All right. I'll keep moving on just for the moment, but feel free to just interrupt me at any point, anyone on the call. Do we talk about the second pillar, where you might be best placed to think about where data can be used in your not-for-profit? Operations is really, really important. So this could entail anything that involves moving the organization day to day, and how you can better track that and understand the efficiency and the effectiveness of the organization. So I'll jump into the types of data that fall under this second banner. So firstly, there are financial metrics that your not-for-profit may or may not already be tracking. And this is really, really key for any company, particularly so for a not-for-profit. And it's actually quite remarkable as to the current state of data for this purpose within not-for-profits. We've worked with a few not-for-profits that weren't able to tell us, say, for example, the retention rate of their donors, which is something that's very critical, but understandably, if you don't have any systems in place, or you're not pulling down some data and analyzing it occasionally, you won't actually have that knowledge at your fingertips. So things like the number of donors, how that's changing over time, the profile of your donors, the mix between men and women, and average age, location of donors, the retention rate of those donors, how many are repeat donors, and then of course there's all your traditional analysis that you can run in terms of expenses and how efficiently you're running as an organization. That's obviously important to you as well. And then there's the marketing angle. So there is a whole set of data out there, a universe of data that many not-for-profits might not be aware of or utilizing, which is firstly data from your website, which can actually be tracked with tools such as Google Analytics. You may or may not be tracking data from the email communications that you send to your donors, or to other interested parties who are following the progress of your charity, understanding how many people are clicking through in the emails that you're sending. And then of course there's other forms of marketing, and you want to be tracking those types of data. So maybe you're holding an event, and it's important to be thinking about tracking registration and whether people who are repeat attenders of events, where they're coming from, why they've attended. All those things could be potentially collected as data if you're doing that through, say, an online sign-up form when you run the event, or even at a simple level, although I wouldn't recommend it, having some form on the day where people will fill in a quick survey when they attend your event. That could be useful, but it then needs to be translated into an online form of data. And then lastly, there's the internal HR aspects of the organization. So number of volunteers, the volunteer retention rate, how volunteer hours are tracking. So all of these metrics are really important. If I jump now into the types of tools that you could be using, on the financial angle, there's a range of tools out there. You might start off probably by using simple free tools such as Excel. Those of you on the call are likely to be Xero customers as well. And obviously that's a tool that you could be using for accounting purposes. There's a tool called Raiser's Edge, which is a great way of tracking your donors. So there's the donor database tools that exist out there. We can talk about those in a little bit more detail if needed. Then if I pivot to the marketing angle, I mentioned before Google Analytics, something that you should have on your radar. If you're using Facebook and Instagram, you can use the Facebook analysis tool and the Instagram insights tools. And then there's also MailChimp, which gives you some insights and statistics around conversion rates. You can all quickly export that data and run it through a program like Excel or Tableau. So we'll get to the analysis angle in a moment, but at this first step, we're really trying to just open awareness as to the types of data that you might be collecting, or that you should be collecting and may not currently. And then from the HR angle, there are some specific software suites that you could use for volunteer management. For example, I mentioned Razor's Edge. So as an example, we worked with one charity recently, and we looked at analyzing the donor profile. So remarkably, this charity had not had no awareness or no detailed awareness as to the average profile of their donor. And so what we did, and I recommend every not-for-profit follow a similar procedure, is if you've got either a simple Excel sheet or you're using a donor CRM, and you can download that information into a simple CSV file, run it through a program like Tableau, you can quickly segment that data by a number of important metrics. So firstly, we looked at segmenting the data by age. Now, most CRMs are probably tracking age when you initially make a donation or you're initially signing up. You've got that data point there next to an individual. And it's really powerful to be able to see what is the average age of your donors and how does giving patterns differ by age. So we saw, for example, in this charity that we worked with, that late to middle age segment was the biggest donor. And they were also the more frequent donors. And the amount that was donated per person on average climbed with age. That's a very useful insight. We also looked at a similar split by gender and saw that whilst for this charity there was an equal number of male and female donors, male donors were donating more often, donating larger gifts on average. Now, there's probably tax implications and other reasons as to why that's the case, but it's useful to start segmenting this data in the first place to get these insights. So we'll run through an example like this in the Thursday session for those that can attend. And then lastly, we looked at visualizing these donors by location. So when an individual donates, they often put forth their postcode, and Tableau and other visualization programs such as Power BI, Google Data Studio provide the opportunity to very quickly visualize location-based data. So literally this can be created within a few clicks on Tableau, and we'll get to that. But it generates a really interesting insight. For this charity, most of their donors were in New South Wales, and we were able to unveil for them the top 10 SA2, so statistical areas, which is a census classification. We're able to reveal where most of the donors came from, and unsurprisingly, they were from wealthier suburbs. But what that was really useful for them is they were able to then understand, well, where are similar areas that are currently underpenetrated in terms of having similar volumes of donations, but have similar characteristics. So if there are other areas, SA2s, that have higher levels of wealth per capita and higher propensity to give and donate to similar causes, then they should be areas that you as a charity could target. So data can unveil a lot of useful insights from this perspective. So I'll pause here before we go into the third pillar. If we've got any questions or extra thoughts on that second pillar of where you might be able to use data analytics in terms of operations.
Simon, I was wondering, would the Xero team might have any ideas around how they might be able to use the data that you can just pull out of Xero as well?
Yeah, so there are a couple of reports in Xero that I think are reasonably well suited for turning into data sets that you can then do your own analysis on. if you're familiar with Xero reports, that two of those that I think are worth looking into are the detailed account transactions report and the income by contacts report. So both of those are you're able to export that data to Excel, and it'll export it in a format that's reasonably amenable to importing into another tool for doing analysis. For account transactions, that lets you see at a very detailed level the where your money is coming from and going to by the account code that you're using, and so you'd be able to get a much more detailed understanding about what your biggest sources of income and biggest sources of expenses are, and look at that over time. And then the contacts, the income by contacts report will let you, if you're coding your donations, for example, with the correct contact IDs for different donors, you'll be able to see, for example, who donated last month but didn't donate this month, or whose donations are decreasing over time or increasing, for example.
Fantastic. That's really useful, I'm sure, for everyone here. I'll keep running for the moment on the third pillar, and that is with regards to impact measurement. So this is probably the most common area or topic that the Good Data Institute is assisting not-for-profits with in helping an organization measure and visualize their impact. Often that's to produce graphics or visualizations such as the maps we saw earlier that can be used in annual reports. They're often used in donor communication, thank you messages, and emails and letters to highlight the impact and the value that not-for-profit's creating. So a really, really important pillar of where you as a not-for-profit should be using data analytics. Thinking about this, there's a lot of theory as to how you can approach this. And we've got a little bit here on this slide, and we're referencing a few documents here as well, which we could potentially circulate after the call, or if you reach out to Vivek or I, we can give you these further resources. But normally the first step in thinking about impact is to have your own sort of social impact framework. So this is obviously relevant to the specific cause that you're targeting. And generally they're thought about in three ways. So there's outputs, outcomes, and attribution. And your social impact framework should cover those three fields and be aligned with your mission statement. So if you can do that, if you can narrowly define that vision and have a clear way of measuring impact with outcomes, outputs, and attribution, that's a really good starting point for then you to be able to find the right data that you need and then run it through the right tools to generate some form of chart or visualization that can show the progress you've made along those pillars or those steps. So for example, some example metrics on the right hand side might be number of actions, number of beneficiaries served, number of program attendees, beneficiary satisfaction rates, pre and post scores, depending on what the charity is tackling. And the other point that I'll mention that's really important to consider is the feasibility of that metric that you're trying to measure. So some things can be done through surveys, others will require some more deeper analysis. So that is just a really important factor to keep in mind as you work out which metrics are most useful in measuring and tracking for your organization. If you can align those metrics as well with third-party sources of data, public sources of data from, say, the UN, the World Bank, that will also give you some really useful baselines as well to measure your impact against. I'll pause there and just pass back to Vivek or anyone else who may have extra comments on this impact angle. Vivek, maybe it's useful if you would like to add any extra color or examples of how we've assisted not-for-profits on that particular topic.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say it's not only not-for-profits as well, like social enterprises as well. One of the best ways for them to kind of retain their customers is by consistently reminding them of what are the ways that they're making impact. So we've worked with a couple of organizations where they might be doing sustainability work and their customers want to know what's my reduction in CO2 emissions, which might not be easy to say, but you might be able to say, for example, another one that does education empowerment, they donate their profits to schools. You can say this is the number of children that you have helped, and providing those sorts of impact metrics or indicators are ways that we've helped out other charities. There was also one question, by the way, and it might be for maybe Martin or Simon, that I know that Power BI connects to Xero. Any idea if Tableau will work directly to Xero? Not sure, but maybe someone from the Xero team.
Sure, yeah. So there isn't a direct connection from Xero to Tableau, but there are several third-party tools that will let you do that. I'm not an expert in that area, so I can't advise you on which of those to use, but it certainly is possible. It's just a couple extra steps than you'd use with Power BI.
I was going to say to that, that's something maybe I can kind of address with people who are more in the know, and then come back with information about that tomorrow. That's okay?
Cool.
Awesome, yeah. And maybe we just share that like in an email to all the attendees or something.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. So, and the other thing I would mention on the impact angle is for not-for-profits that are larger in scale and size, data analytics becomes really powerful because you're often going to be dealing with either very unfamiliar data sets or very large data sets. And that's where data analytics can become very powerful. As an example, when we worked with a microfinance organization working in Indonesia, their data set, their impact data set, so they were taking surveys and collecting a lot of data for the loan recipients, the microfinance loan recipients, and how their lives changed across the course of that loan, which enabled them to start their own business. All of that data was, firstly, it was in a different language, and secondly, it was millions of rows long because this particular charity, very, very large in scale, and are operating across many countries. And they were challenged by the task of tackling that data to understand at a top level how much progress was being made because of those challenges. So with data analytics, we were able to use firstly a program called Ultrex. Ultrex enabled us to do a spatial match or a special match on all of the data set to convert languages to English. And then once we had that data set in English, we were able to run it through Tableau and generate some really interesting views where it's very easy to segment outcomes by whatever metric you're interested in. So whether it's age, location, or so on. And that's very difficult to do in Excel when you've got a million rows. And the only easy workaround is a pivot table, and that in itself can be challenging. So scale, if you're a large not-for-profit, this is where data analytics becomes very powerful as well. But at the base level on this slide, really we're suggesting that you can use simple programs like we've mentioned before, Excel, Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, and your CRM to track that data as a starting point. And then in terms of storing data, managing data, most very small organizations are probably in this first bucket, are using still local storage if you're a very small not-for-profit. But I'm sure most not-for-profits are transitioning and have their data stored under the cloud at this point in time. So Fortunately, there are a lot of free options out there. So the Good Data Institute ourselves, we use Google Drive. You've also got Dropbox, OneDrive, Box, Amazon Web Services, and obviously that is a more scalable option. And obviously there are some extra considerations that one needs to take into account with that, though, such as data protection and privacy. We could talk to that at a later point if anyone had any follow-up questions on that. And so lastly, we get to analyzing and presenting. So we covered those three pillars as to where data analytics is really useful within a not-for-profit. Once you've sort of identified that, the rest of the session and tomorrow's session will focus on analyzing data and presenting data. So whilst it's really important to just have those fundamentals in place and be tracking data and recording data in the right ways, the real fun starts at this step when you get the chance to analyze your data and present it in a powerful way. So whilst most organizations are probably thinking about Excel when it comes to analysis, it's really important to recognize that there are now a number of tools that are often free for not-for-profits that have begun to surface that can be used to democratize data analytics. They're very simple tools. They don't require someone who's very analytically minded, because most of these tools, such as Tableau, actually use drag and drop style functionality. So when it comes to visualization, the ones that we'd sort of raise and put on your radar are Google Data Studio, which is free, Tableau, which we will use in the example tomorrow, free under certain constraints, and paid if you want to scale to a certain level and have no requirements as to the sensitivity or the public nature of your data, and then Power BI as well. So there's trade-offs among all of those tools, but it's worth exploring those tools because they can really speed up the process for you as a not-for-profit to start analyzing that data, whether it's a CRM that you pull down of your donors and you start to pull some different views and insights together so you can understand that profile, or whether it's the financials of your not-for-profit. A lot of analysis can be done very quickly with these types of tools. So I'm going to pause here. Actually, I'll pass back to Vivek, who's going to cover the next section. And a good chance as well for any questions, if there are any that have been raised so far.
None on the Slido, but maybe someone wants to ask any questions. Cool. So just the last thing that I guess before Tom goes into the Tableau stuff would be to maybe just provide some context about the wider data science or big data landscape to help you guys maybe just have conversations or declutter some of the mystique that you guys hear or get spooked out by. So there's a lot of buzzwords in the data industries, things like AI, big data, machine learning, etc. So to help understand and kind of better dimension your understanding of big data, it's often described using these things called the 5 Vs of big data: volume, velocity, variety, veracity, and value. So the first one, volume, which is of course referring to just the sheer amount of data that we generate. And in fact, there's been a few studies that have actually shown this, that say that if we take all the human data generated from kind of the start of humanity till about 2008, these days we generate more data every minute than we did in that entire time. And it's not uncommon for kind of professionals to be working with really large scales of data in the order of thousands of terabytes, which would be equivalent to like a pretty expensive laptop storage times 1,000. That's just the volume. And then the velocity of this is really referring to how quickly data can change. This is probably really easily understood by looking at a tweet or a viral video or something on TikTok, which is quite topical lately. They can have very quick effects, and the rate at which the data changes or the distribution of how things change can move really quickly. And so we have to have technologies that can enable us to analyze these tweets or analyze these contents really quickly and without having to store them as well. Variety. So data doesn't only have to come in the form of really like tabular forms. So spreadsheets is what people are most used to, or relational databases is something else that you might have heard of as well. But things like financial data, donations, user tables are often spreadsheets. But now there's tools that you can use or services that you can purchase that will analyze video for you, images, text, and audio as well. So Google Translate's probably something a lot of you people have used as well. And it's not surprising for someone to be looking at kind of survey feedback from different countries and then using perhaps Google Translate across all of the survey responses to translate kind of content from, say, German to English as an example. And those forms are called unstructured data sets. The second to last one is veracity, which is really just referring to how authentic or accurate or messy the data is. And depending on the context, it might not matter. So if we're looking at classifying, say, certain tweets as spam or something else, the accuracy of whether or not the tweet was from actually the person who wrote it or not might not be as important for that use case. But say we're trying to find fraud transactions in a credit card, then the authenticity and accuracy is really important. And often the last and most overlooked one is value. So you don't want to just be kind of downloading all of your data from all the different sources that you have just so you can analyze it. You always need to make sure that you're keeping your eye on your time and valuing your time, because whenever you kind of put effort and resources into data and analytics, the most important thing you should consider is really just getting your value out of the effort that you're putting in. So having access to these tools and technology is important unless you've actually got a strategy for what you want to do with the data. And I guess GDI has worked with a lot of organizations on helping them do that as well. So I'll pass it back over to you, Tom. And Tom's just going to discuss kind of the next section where he'll do a demonstration of Tableau, and then tomorrow it'll be the big kind of exercise for all of you where you can kind of play with a sample data set that we've made, which often a lot of charities might have, which is a donor data set.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Vivek. So yeah, really useful to keep those 5 dimensions of data in mind that Vivek mentioned as you explore this further, this topic. So lastly, we'll just finish off the call with an introduction to Tableau. I really just wanted to go through Tableau, what it is, how you can use it for free, and what type of data Tableau likes. We'll start off with this interesting chart, which can walk you through the various types of Tableau that are out there. So there's various permutations of Tableau, and depending on what you're after and what you're aiming to do, you can use a different type of Tableau. So the first thing at the very top of the screen is, do you want to create a visualization? So if you do, if you want to be able to have the power to create and develop something, then on the left-hand side, you are moving down the path of Tableau Desktop Professional, Desktop Personal, or Tableau Public. The main difference here is if you can get away with the fact that your data can be public, depending on what type of analysis you're doing, that may or may not be relevant, then you can run with Tableau Public for free. So Tableau Public is what we will use tomorrow for the exercise. So the main thing to keep in mind there is Tableau Public is free, but it does require that your data is public. Now, if you...
maybe just put in the hack there that if you just want to do the analysis and share your insights, you can always just not publish anything and then just take screenshots or something of your analysis, so you can use the functionality of Tableau and still privately. You just can't send the live dashboard to someone. So that's
yeah.
You
don't need to interact on it.
Just don't tell Tableau that we said that.
That's a good workaround. Agreed. And I think really that's all that I need to mention on this side. But of this particular schematic. Do you think, Vivek, that sort of covers it? I think the main thing for you all to be aware of is that as a not-for-profit, there are also avenues for you to pick up a license for free up to a certain size scale of operation. So it's worth us double checking that as well on the Tableau website, that you can download a full version, so Tableau desktop, for free up to a certain size, a certain number of licenses per NFP. So Tableau really is very versatile. It can connect to a variety of different data sets, as shown here. But the main one and the most common data set that Tableau is useful for working with is Excel. So the way that you can consider Tableau is it's a more advanced tool for analysis and visualization, but there's a heavy emphasis there on the visualization aspect. So it's mostly useful for producing charts, graphics, and as we showed an example of before, a geographical view or visualization of data and how it's laid out across a spatial area. And it's really important to note there's a few sort of key fundamental pieces to understanding how to structure your data before you start the analysis process. So Tableau likes what is referred to as narrow normalized data sets. Basically, that's as simple as meaning that every row should be a unique record. So you can see there on the left-hand side, Tableau would appreciate that sort of input because every row there is unique. Whereas we've got a crosstab on the right-hand side of the screen, which Tableau would not appreciate. And you could manipulate your data before it gets into that form to make sure that it's in that left-hand side. So you could do you could do a pivot, or you could use Alt-X to change the way that data is laid out. So I think that's. Just give me a moment. So the second. Sorry about the distractions. So this is a really important thing to keep in mind.
Making a booping sound. Oh, it stopped. Okay, cool.
We'll touch upon this again in tomorrow's session, but I think this is an important sort of conceptual piece that of understanding before you start using Tableau is understanding exactly what's the form of the data set that Tableau requires to be most effective. And if you do need to manipulate that data, you can do so through Excel, as I mentioned, with a pivot table, Alt-X, which I mentioned earlier as well, which is another useful tool specifically for advanced analysis, and Tableau Prep as well as software that integrates really well with Tableau and just enables you to manipulate that data and clean your data before you start playing around with visualizations. So at this point, we're going to stop and we'll just put it forward to questions or any closing remarks. I hope you can join as well tomorrow, where we can do an example and a demonstration together as a group. But I just want to say as well, thank you for dialing in and listening to this. I think it's really, really great that you're exploring data analytics, how it can be used in your not-for-profit. And yeah, I hope to be in touch with you as well if you'd ever like the support of the Good Data Institute, which is as we mentioned up front, volunteer-run organisation, completely pro bono, and involves a community of young professionals who want to give back their time and energy to important not-for-profit causes.
Can I just really quickly add, so for those who are on the call, I'm recording this, so I'll just trim it up and share it with the rest of the group, and there are possibly some other people who signed up to this but weren't able to make it. Tom, are you able to share the slide deck as well? Are you able to send it to me and I can kind of share that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very happy to do that, Ruth.
Send that out as well. Yeah, awesome, cool.
There was a question on the Slido. 2 questions. The first one was, does Tableau work with Google Sheets? And I presume, Tom, do you want to take that? Yes.
Yeah. So the good news there is it's very simple to bring your Google Sheet down into sort of a live backup document. I'll have to double check and get back to you as to whether it can be used without doing that, without actually downloading that Excel first into a sort of a hard copy version. As I'm not sure whether you can go direct.
Well, you can look at Google Data Studio, which definitely directly connects to Google Sheets, and that way, if you're wanting to do a quick dashboard that updates with your Google Sheet, you can use Google Data Studio. Another question, Tom, can Tableau handle data sets on different sheets within the same workbook rather than needing multiple workbooks or different data sets, e.g. multiple years, where I'm guessing 1 year is one sheet on the data set?
Yeah, it can. Yeah, so that's another good question as well. There's a few steps you can take there. Every analysis piece, firstly, can connect to an individual Excel sheet of its own. If the sheets are interrelated and you need to use pieces of data from one sheet and a second sheet, you can quite easily join data within Tableau, but you can also pull pieces. So any metric or dimension that may come from sheet A, and you may then have a second metric from sheet B, Tableau can take either of those into one single view or visualization. Although best practice would typically be to have one consolidated data set up front.
Cool.
I was going to say a real quick question with regards to Tableau and for tomorrow's session. Is it something we have to download, or is it like web-based, or?
Yeah, great question, Ruth. So we will use for tomorrow's session, Tableau Public. You do need to download that. So you can just search quickly for Tableau Public. I think the link was also in the initial invite. Very quick to install, and you can use that through your desktop.
The link's not in the invite, Tom. So maybe when we send Ruth the slide, we just include the link to download it and some instructions.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just 5 minutes before you join onto the call tomorrow, just make sure you've got Tableau Public installed.
Cool. That would be great.
Yeah. Are there any more questions or comments, maybe from the Xero team? Cool. Sounds good.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining, and I hope that you can join tomorrow as well. Please, if you can't, please also just reach out if you think that we can assist your organization in any way. And thanks to Xero as well for joining and collaborating here.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you very much, guys. Cool. Hopefully see you all
Thanks.
tomorrow, same time. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.